you've been paying attention to the news, you will likely have seen Congresswoman Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez's stuttering, bungling answer at the Munich Security Conference when asked the question of whether the United States would intervene in Taiwan militarily, to which the answer should have been no. In this video, I will briefly explain the answer that she should have given in the history of Taiwan, China, the United States, why Taiwan matters to the U.S., and hopefully, at the very least, you will come away with more of an understanding than AOC. Hi, this is Olivia's History Zone. Here, I analyze geopolitics, history, and just anything else that I find interesting. As a reminder, I do make mistakes, so if I do, you spot something, please respectfully indicate if I did so in the comments. Also, consider liking and subscribing. Now, let's talk about Taiwan. Taiwan, sometimes referred to in history as the island of Formosa, is a subtropical island roughly 100 to 112 miles or 160 to 180 kilometers for those outside the U.S. from mainland China, separated by the Taiwan Strait. It was conquered and annexed to China by the Qing Empire in 1683. Upon the end of the Sino-Japanese War in 1895, Taiwan was ceded to Japan and was a Japanese colony until 1945, the end of World War II. Following Japan's surrender, the Republic of China, better known as the Kuomintang, took over. To give a bit of perspective of what was going on, mainland China had been locked in a brutal civil war separated into two stages, from 1927 to 1937 and 1945 to 1949, with a pause during World War II as both sides united to fight against Japan. The two main sides in the Civil War were the Communists, led by Mao Zedong, the chairman of the Communist Party of China, and the future leader of China for over a quarter of a century, and the Nationalists, or Kuomintang, led by General Chiang Kai-shek. In 1949, the Communists won, and Mao Zedong established the People's Republic of China on October 1st, 1949. Chiang Kai-shek was forced to flee to Taiwan with the rest of the Kuomintang army and 1.2 million supporters. In this way, the Republic of China, which is the official name of Taiwan, was created. The United States, under President Harry Truman, was, by this point, deep in the Cold War and had supported the Kuomintang during the Chinese Civil War, with Chiang Kai-shek being a key ally against Japan in the Pacific theater. The Soviet Union under Stalin had supported the Communists. So, obviously, Truman did not want to give the Soviet-backed People's Republic of China or Mao Zedong any sort of Western legitimacy, so he recognized the Republic of China in Taiwan instead, which would set the tone for U.S. foreign policy for the next 23 years. President Eisenhower even signed the Mutual Defense Treaty with Taiwan in 1955, designed to protect Taiwan from attack by China, which had already happened during the first Taiwan Strait crisis, of which there were three over a 40-year period. The first Taiwan Strait crisis of 1954 and 1955, which had been caused by China shelling islands controlled by Taiwan, particularly those of Kinmen and Matsu, which triggered the aforementioned Mutual Defense Treaty in 1955. The first Taiwan Strait crisis ended with a ceasefire after U.S. military support deterred further escalation. The second Taiwan Strait crisis in 1958 occurred after the renewed artillery bombardment by China against Kinmen Island, which once again prompted the U.S. to supply and support Taiwanese forces. After weeks of intense shelling, fighting was once again de-escalated. This marked the end of open military hostilities from China to Taiwan for nearly 40 years, until 1995, when the third Taiwan Strait crisis was triggered when Taiwanese President Lee Teng-hui visited the U.S. and China carried out missile tests and military drills near Taiwan to intimidate voters before Taiwan's first democratic presidential election, during which the U.S. sent aircraft carrier groups to the straits. Tensions cooled down after the election in 1996, marking the end of the third crisis. Under Chiang Kai-shek from 1949 to 1975, Taiwan was transformed into an economic powerhouse known as the Taiwan Miracle, largely due to being under martial law until 1987. This was in stark contrast to the situation in mainland China under Mao Zedong, which experienced the worst man-made famine in history between 1958 to 1962, resulting in the deaths of some 50 million Chinese as the result of unrealistic, catastrophic policies to rapidly advance China past Great Britain and the United States industrially and economically, known as the Great Leap Forward, and the Cultural Revolution between 1966 and 1976, during which Mao Zedong launched to reassert his authority, purge capitalist elements, and enforce orthodox communist ideology. But both of those are stories for another time and another video. Since 1949, Taiwan had been the only recognized China on the world stage, for the most part, save for other communist states recognizing mainland China under the Chinese Communist Party. This changed dramatically in 1972 when President Nixon visited Beijing from February 21st to February 28th as part of his administration's effort to establish diplomatic ties between the United States and the People's Republic of China. His visit marked the first time that an American president visited China, ending 23 years of the lack of diplomatic ties between the two countries. The visit had the motive of gaining leverage over the Soviet Union in the wake of the Sino-Soviet rift, which had begun in the late 1950s after Stalin's death in 1953 and Khrushchev's secret speech denouncing Stalin and Stalinist policies in 1956. The question then was of what to do in regards to ties with Taiwan, which were formally answered in the One China policy, which firstly comprises the 1979 Taiwan Relations Act, the successor to the 1955 Mutual Defense Treaty, maintaining commercial, cultural, and security ties, including providing defense after the U.S. switched diplomatic recognition from Taipei to Beijing in 1979. Secondly are several communiques, and lastly, the 6 assurances, which stipulate the following: no date for the ending of arms sales to Taiwan from the United States, no consultation with the People's Republic of China on arms sales to Taiwan, no mediation by the United States for Taiwan-Beijing relations, no revision to the Taiwan Relations Act, no changes in sovereignty position, and finally, that the U.S. will not pressure Taiwan into negotiations with China. So, while the United States broke off official diplomatic ties to the Republic of China, Taiwan, the Taiwan Relations Act was something of an unofficial reestablishment of ties so that the United States could have relations with both China and Taiwan, known as the strategic ambiguity approach to prevent a formal declaration of independence by Taiwan and military intervention by Beijing by acknowledging rather than actually recognizing China's territorial claim to Taiwan. The 1979 Taiwan Relations Act guides U.S. foreign policy towards Taiwan to this day, and most recently in 2018, the Taiwan Travel Act promotes, encourages, and removes restrictions on high-level official visits between the United States and Taiwan, reversing previous restrictions and strengthening the bilateral relationship by bolstering Taiwanese economic stability, solidarity, and democracy. Taiwan is very important to the United States and the world in general for many reasons, most notably for its role in the production of computer chips. Taiwan manufactures over 90% of the world's advanced logic chips, and around 60% of the world's semiconductors. Its production is vital to several industries, such as the smartphone, computer, AI, defense, and automotive industries. Even to say that Taiwan is of major importance would be an understatement, and it only barely scratches the surface on the importance of U.S.-Taiwan relations. Taiwan is a top 10 trading partner, meaning that it is strategically invaluable to American economic and technological interests, with U.S. imports from Taiwan totaling $158 billion in the year 2024 alone. It is also a first island chain for regional security against Chinese aggression in the United States Indo-Pacific defense strategy, acting as a defensive buffer for Japan and the Philippines, longtime U.S. allies. Taiwan also serves as a model for liberal democratic achievements, being a thriving democracy and a bastion of liberal values and human rights in the Asia-Pacific region, in stark contrast to China, which is governed by the authoritarian, repressive Chinese Communist Party. So, there you have it. A brief history of U.S.-Taiwan relations and policy, how it shapes the current landscape today, all the details that any U.S. politician, elected or appointed, should have knowledge on, as the Constitution grants Congress significant power to shape and influence international relations. And, as AOC has shown, without the right knowledge, how can someone articulate a cohesive answer? Thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, enjoyable, or something or the other, like and subscribe. I'll continue covering political and geopolitical issues with depth, context, and clarity.